What's up? In the first round, Firouzja was the only one who take the victory in the classical game and beating Magnus Carlsen. And in the second game, he repeated white pieces and this time against praggnanandhaa, so let's see what happened in the game. Firouzja opened with d4, that's against Magnus Carlsen, d5, c4, e6, knight f3, knight f6, knight c3. Carlsen in this game against Firouzja play h6 and Firouzja responds with a3, but this time praggnanandhaa goes for the semi-slav defense, bishop g5. The other main move here was e3, so bishop g5. And in my career playing the semi-slav, I employ the move h6 and the winning variation with d takes e4. But okay, knight b7 is a normal move, going for a carpet. C takes, e takes. But okay, this is a carpet with the knight on f3, who, but okay, it's fine for white, of course. E3, h6, bishop g4, g5, bishop g3, knight h5, bishop d3, knight takes, and bishop g7. And here, I want to stop here because now the position changed so much in the last moves. Black have the bishop pair, but white, in change of that, have a good pawn structure with the open h file, light square bishop having the pawns in the different color, and white have more development. But I think that this is a good opening for black, because okay, black take the bishop pair, and I don't think that white have enough counterplay to be better. Okay, I understand that white is more equal, but I don't really think that white takes so much advantage from the opening. Okay, white have more central pawns. Black cannot be short castle, maybe if white goes long castle, but I think that black is fine here. But okay, the position is more or less balanced because okay, white played his dark square bishop, he's still having his good bishop of the center. Black light square bishop have no huge perspectives. The other problem of black position is that the bishop that black have that white haven't is the g7 bishop, but he have so much difficulties to play c5. So that's why white could be slightly better, because the dark square bishop have troubles to be active. Okay, but here in this moment white should decide his plan, because white have like two plans, or go short castle or go long castle. And if you go short castle, later you should decide if you are going to break on e4 or if you are going to play before a4. I think that a minority attack is the best option here. Okay, he played queen c2, who is a neutral move. After queen c2 you still can go long and short castle. Okay, for example, short castle was another option, and just place the pieces like this, trying to attack the black king. But okay, just with the queen and the bishop is going to be hard, because just king f8 and there is no checkmate. But this is a possibility. But okay, queen c2, neutral move. Both castles are still being open. Firouzja played knight b6, logical move. He wants to open this bishop and not to be developed to f5, but okay, this bishop should go to e6. But okay, this bishop is open, and then I can jump to c4 one day maybe. And here, I say white should decide if go short castle or long castle. I prefer a little bit more the move short castle, and black should go at the same side that white goes. For example, if white goes long castle, you can go short, because this rook is in the open file and you are going to receive checkmate. For example, knight here doesn't work yet, but looks very scary to go short castle here with the rook on h1. So if black goes long castle, black should go long castle too. If white goes long castle, and if white goes short, now you can go short, because the rook is no more on h5, and it's not the same to throw an attack with your king on g1 than with your king on b1. But here, after short castle, here white have this interesting plan of b4 and throw a minority attack in the queen side, who of course is so typical in the carpet structures. Of course, and Firouzja knows the plan, but in this game he decided that long castle could be a better option. But a minority attack here is maybe the best option. Rook e8 now on b5, takes 95, and this pawn sacrifice is interesting. Or if queen e7, who looks very logical, attacking before, now we're going to sacrifice the pawn with a4, trying to play fast. And this another pawn sacrifice is very interesting for white. But in general, the good plan of the position is through a minority attack in the queen side. Rook ac1 is another normal move. For example, if rook e8 bad move, now we have before, so for that reason black should play a5. Now 95. 95 again, very interesting, no? Because if rook e8 a normal move, just bishop h7 and f4 is the attack is coming. So 95 is an interesting move to attack the black king. So 97 he should return to trade the knights. Takes and bishop g5. And okay, we can play a position with a knight against this bishop. This is interesting. Instead of that, Firouzja goes for a completely different approach, who is fine too. It's not bad. He goes for long castle. Bishop b6 by black. Like I say, short castle here have no sense because the rook is on h1. Bishop a6, and now both players improve his kings. King b1, queen e7, rook c1, and now long castle, knight a4, king b8, knight c5, with maneuvering, improving the knight, and rook c8. We see that both players go long castle, but later they play king b8, king b1, and rook c8, rook c1, placing better the rooks, and placing safer the kings, of course. And here, Firouzja played queen b3, who is not my favorite move. I prefer knight d2 and go to b3 with the knight. Because after the knight lands on b3, I have two ideas, or go to c5, trying to take on b7, and if black plays knight d7, we can trade knights and put the other knight on c5. So I prefer this move, knight b2. The idea is prevent knight d7 and go for the b7 pawn. Okay, Firouzja play queen b3 is not my favorite move, rook c7. Here he has more aggressive a4, trying to play a5 and queen a3 first. But okay, he played rook c3, trying to double rooks into the c file. Rook h1, and finally good move by. Let's see that Pragg places his king on a8, very safe in the corner. And he finally played knight b8. He needs to play the king on a8 here, because if you play knight d7, and knight a6 is coming. And I suppose that Firouzja play queen b3, because again, if knight d7, this is checkmate. So Pragg needs to play first rook c7 and later king a8 to finally can trade this knight. But now we are seeing that the knight could be great on b3 and trading on d7 and later going to c5. But okay, he trades, takes, and a4. He finally starts to push the pawn to attack the black king. Despite that white have here the king, the white plan should be attack the black king. h5, good move by Pragg. All his pieces are aiming the queen side, so he should try to play a little bit in the queen side. And white is going to play in the, sorry, black should play in the king side and white should play in the queen side. Queen c2 by Firouzja. Firouzja really play queen b3, just trying to avoid the plan of knight d7, but the queen on b3 is not making nothing, and he have the idea of trade the dark bishop pair, black bishop pair, because when our opponent have the bishop pair, used to be a good idea to trade one of these bishops. And because this bishop is attacking so much the queen side, the king side, and he wants to trade and try to take the control of the squares. Bishop f6 takes here. Pragg take with the rook. I think that is a little bit more natural take with the queen. But okay, maybe he was afraid about e4. Is a possibility. Or he could be afraid of knight d5 too. This could be a normal line. So okay, it's understandable this move. Knight d1. And here comes a very interesting move of the game, because now black is coming with knight d3, knight c5, a5, and white is going to create an attack in the queen side. So it's important to see how we are going to react with black. This is the most interesting position of the game. Here Pragg played queen e4 with a mistake. He thinks, okay, white wants to play knight d3 and knight c5, and he wants to attack my king. So I'm going to trade queens. The problem of trade queen, okay, later we're going to see the problem of this move. Now I'm going to focus in another option for black. For example, during the game, I thought about h3, just pushing this pawn and trying to open the h file. but this doesn't help black nothing because the h4 pawn is giving space for black and makes that the g2 pawn is so weak. So if white activates his knight with knight c3, knight c5, knight c3, knight c5, with black we can king with rook g8, rook g2, taking this pawn and later advancing the h pawn. So especially because the h pawn is the only asset that we have in the queen side. In the king side, sorry, in the queen side we have all the control of the position, but if we trade all the pawns in the king side we have nothing there. So trade this pawn is a very bad idea. It's important to keep the g2 pawn over the board and the h4 pawn over the board to one day play rook g8 and take on g2 to later can push the a pawn. Yeah, I forget to on the light. Okay. So let's see more options that black can do. For example, if he just try to open his king, just 93 and white is better. So black should make useful moves. For example, queen d6 could be a great move here. Just waiting what white is going to do and improving a little bit the queen. And if white play, for example, queen f5, this is a good way to trade queens. A trade queens is a good way. The problem is that trade the queens in the e4 square. That's the huge problem of trade queens. But here, trade queen for black is not bad. For example, 93. So queen d6 is just a waiting move, improving a little bit the position. And after 93, that's the move that we are waiting to play rook g8, attacking g2. And white shouldn't lose time defending this pawn. White should still play inactive with b4, rook g2 and b5. But okay, this is the fight that is very, very interesting. Now rook c7 defending the pawn. And that's we are seeing why it's important to place the queen on d6 to can defend the c6 pawn after a possible b4 b5 breakthrough. Now a5, white can still push in his pawns, bishop b7, rook b3, h3, knight d4, here c5, and the position is more or less balanced. Or rook c7 is another normal move who have the same idea of queen d6, just wait till white plays knight d3, improving a little bit the position, and later play rook g8 and take the g2 pawn. Example, something like this can transpose. But Prague was afraid of the queenside attack and about the 93 move, so he trade queens. The problem of trade queens on e4 is that after take rook c5, the rook is coming to f5, who is going to be very, very annoying because he's spinning this piece, he's attacking this bishop, he's attacking this pawn, and nobody can eject the rook from f5. And added to that, the e4 pawn is going to be so weak because it's in a light square. And okay, this knight now is a little bit far from take this pawn. Okay, that's true. But the knight needs like 1, 2, 3, 4 moves to take the e4 pawn. But after these 4 moves, white cannot be defend the pawn. So it can look like the knight is very bad place and needs many tempos to attack the pawn, but black cannot do nothing during this time. Here, and added to that, he made an important mistake making h3. Some moments ago, I say that black should keep these pawns over the board to attack the pawn with rook g8 and rook g2 after this knight gets off from e1. But if we are trading our only good pawn, now it's going to be so easy for white. Here, a move like king b8 and try this pawn sacrifice is interesting because after the rook takes, the problem of white position is that this knight can never go so far because rook g7 is coming attacking g2. That's why it's very, very important to keep the h4 pawn and the g2 pawn over the board because the g4 pawn, g2 pawn, sorry, keeps the knight on e1 without can be active. a6 is another possibility, but okay, I prefer king b8, bringing the king to the center. Prague made another important mistake again with h3. Now after takes and rook f5 is very hard to hold the game. bishop d8 was the best option. For example, rook e8, rook h4, and we defend by in the fourth rank. If rook f4, rook h4 too. And if knight c2, for example, now we can bring the king, and now we are seeing that open the g file is helping to the black rook to have more files to be active. So black have a difficult task now. Rook d6 was not the best. Knight c2. Now the black knight starts a route to attack the a4 pawn. King e7, rook e4. Now we are attacking with the rook e6. Now the machines really like this maneuver of knight a1 coming to e3 and to c5. Example, and he can start with rook g4 too, and after rook h6 defending the bishop. Now knight e1 is very good. Rook g6 and rook h5. That's the idea. Because if, for example, if a normal move like king a2, black here have rook g6, rook h5, bishop e7, takes, and okay, white position is better, but okay, there is still big game. Because the idea is that here one day black can play with rook f6, bishop takes, and take this pawn, for example, if knight b4. And I don't know if knight b4 have so much sense, but yes, if for example if white start a maneuver to attack this pawn, for example black can play something like that, and if he takes, now this pawn falls. So that's why knight a1 first is so good, just trying to activate fast the king, the knight, sorry. Okay, he make another good maneuver with knight b4, but all the time the idea is activate the knight so can capture the e4 pawn, the g4 pawn, sorry. Rook a6, knight a2, rook g6, good maneuver by black too, but after take knight, rook f4, now the knight is coming to c3 and this pawn is going to fall, and after the a4 pawn falls, the game is lost for black. That's why black tried c5, but just take b6, knight b4, and white is completely winning because all black pawns are in dark squares, and early a second pawn is going to fall. So finally Firouzja wins the game and his second victory of the tournament. And in the Norway chess in open section we only had 2 victories in the first 2 rounds in the classical games, of course, and the 2 victories are for Firouzja, who was injured of the ankle, so have very merit to make that with an injury, because it's very annoying to play chess in this position. So congratulations to Firouzja, and let's see how continue the tournament. Bye bye.